What's up, everyone? Welcome to Level 7 of the Severed Floor. I'm your host, TJ Zwarych, for another episode of the Agents of Fandom podcast, talking about Severance, Season 3, Episode 8. I don't have my trusty co-host, Rachel Leishman, with me today. She is out. I saw the schedule, having the busiest day ever, seeing all the movies at South by Southwest this year. You can find her reviews up over at the Mary Sue, so make sure you stay tuned for those. She will be back next week as we talk about Episode 9. I have two very good friends joining me today, both multiple-time guests here on the Agents of Fandom podcast. First up, a guy who he was at South by Southwest last year himself, piling out the reviews. Ethan Simi from the Movie Draft podcast. Welcome back, my friend.
What's up, TJ? I'm glad to be here. I hope Rachel's having a great time at South by. Reality hit me this morning that I am not at South by this year for Agents of Fandom, and I got really sad and depressed because I had a really good time last year. So, but this is the second best thing here, recording with you, talking about Severance.
I appreciate that. I couldn't agree more. I'm excited to dive into this episode with you, and next year we're gonna get these things back. We had a busy year, but next year we're gonna get back going to these things. And joining us as well, I believe he was on the first or second episode of our Severance pod, hosting our Invincible after show with me, the newest writer of agentsofandom.com, Sean Motts, MetalCore Nerds. How you doing, my friend?
Doing great. It's Friday, Severance Day. What better way to celebrate than to talk about possibly the weirdest episode of Severance with you guys?
Definitely a weird one. We'll dive into our thoughts. Before we do, smash the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming shows. We got a lot of really fun stuff coming next week. On Monday, Sean and I will have an interview with the Newton brothers, composers of Daredevil Born Again, X-Men 97, so many other wonderful projects. We'll talk about the theme. We'll talk about their time on set, etc., etc. That'll drop on Monday. Tuesday, immediately after Daredevil Born Again, we'll have our live after show. Myself, Damon, Noah Reed reads from A Bite of Pod, as well as our friend MTF, Michael Terrell Ford, joining us for that one. So we got a really great show. On Thursday, we'll be back talking Invincible. On Friday, we'll be back talking Severance. And on Saturday, we have the Comic Corner talking about all of the brand new comics through Marvel, DC, indie stuff, etc. You got Damon, you got Fat Thor, you got AF for that one. So check it out. Smash the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Follow the Agents of Fandom on socials, at Agents Fandom on TikTok and Twitter, Agents of Fandom everywhere else. Before we talk Severance, I want to know what you're watching. For two reasons. One, because Sean, I know you watch a lot of TV, and I know we had you on at the start of the Severance show, and now we're nearing the end, so I want to know what you've been watching since then. And two, Ethan, you're a movie aficionado, my friend. You're always watching new movies, old movies. I know you just saw Mickey 17, so I'll start with you. What you been watching?
Yeah, I feel like it is my duty every time I come to pod with you, TJ, that I do have to, stand for the film community here. I got to put out some good recs. So I'll put out a few things that I have been watching as of late. I recently rewatched Matt and Mara, a small movie that came out of TIFF last year, a Canadian staple. If people are looking for a nice short movie about two people trying to fall in love, this is a great film. Currently streaming on Mubi. It is a really, really, really good movie. One of my favorites of 2024. You mentioned old movies. I watched the 1935 Best Picture winner, It Happened One Night. Really kind of set the precedent for the Academy Awards back then and changed what could be done. One of the few movies to win the Big Five. Really great movie. Check it out. Streaming on Criterion Channel right now. And then, yeah, like you said, I watched Mickey 17 last night. I had a good time, not a great time. I think it's an okay, a pretty good movie. I like Robert Pattinson, and I like Bong Joon-ho being very silly, and that is my Mickey 17 review. I have yet to see a 2025 release that is a 4-star film. I will put that out there, and people will say this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, but I stand firm in my belief that there have been no great films of 2025 so far. So I'm putting in the work. I'm just not getting the rewards, but hopefully soon.
You can find our review of Mickey 17 from the wonderful Adam Blevins up on agentsofandom.com. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, to confirm, you'll have to check it out yourselves up on agentsofandom.com. I believe that was his first 4-star of 2025. Okay. It hit 4 exactly, not 4.5, not 5, but a first one that just hit 4. And that's kind of what he said as well, is like, could have maybe been a little bit better, not as good as Parasite, but still a very good film. And from what we've seen of 2025 so far, and for my opinion, I'm going to go back and say 2024 included, we haven't seen, I feel like TV is leveling up on a higher level lately than movie has been, with Paradise, Severance, all these incredible shows on right now. Paradise has just come to a conclusion, and episode 7 was one of the best episodes of television I've seen in the past couple of years. So really, really strong TV right now. Movies, I feel like have just been fine. You know, like some good movies, but not any earth-shattering ones in the past like year and a bit.
I think at least right now we're still feeling the effects of the strike, and I really think in terms of big auteurs and filmmakers, we have new PTA coming, we have new Wes Anderson coming in April. Like, we have movies coming. They are on the docket, just nothing quite yet. But it is early March, and that is to be expected. There's just nothing quite out there. I will say, I think this time last year was a much better slate, but overall 2024 ended up being just a pretty good year for movies, not like an incredible year for movies. So I'm very curious to see where 2025 takes us. But yeah, there's movies out there, just nothing great so far. I think Steven Soderbergh's Black Bag will be the first great movie of 2025. We shall see when it comes out next week.
A shout out to Richie in chat. He's saying he realized Adam Scott is the voice of a commercial he always sees after doing his binge watch for Severance. Didn't notice it until he goes back. Never going to watch that commercial the same way again. Was it Adam Scott? Was it a severed version? Is that another job for him? I don't know. But shout out to those in the YouTube chat joining us live. Let us know what you thought about Severance episode 8. Let us know what you've been watching. Movies, TV shows. I just finished Paradise. We were trying to do as many of the Best Picture Oscar noms as we can. We got through about 2/3 of them. Ethan, I do want to know what your thoughts on a record-breaking film, Anora, with Sean Baker being the first guy to win. Was it first to win 4 Oscars for the same movie, 5 Oscars for the same movie? Do you think this movie is worthy of all that love?
I do not. I think Anora is good. I think it is a good film. I actually saw it at TIFF last year and thought it was quite good and quite substantial in what it represented for movies. And then I saw it again, and I thought it was a little bit worse than I remember it being. I actually think it's Sean Baker's weakest film to date and his weakest script. So if you liked Anora, I strongly suggest you check out movies like The Florida Project or Tangerine, or more specifically Red Rocket, which I think is his strongest film as a filmmaker. Yes, he did make history as the first person to win 4 Academy Awards for a single movie. Of course, Walt Disney did do that, but it wasn't for a single film. And notably, Bong Joon-ho for Parasite does not have a 4th Academy Award to his name because it does go to the country, unfortunately, which I think is a big gaffe in terms of the Academy Awards and the setup of international feature. I didn't expect Anora personally to go 5 of 6 at the Academy Awards. I thought Conclave was going to pull it out, and I thought that we would have a much more dispersed year. I have a lot of thoughts that we could just like really devolve into, but I don't think Anora was the movie. And I know that's a hot take for a lot of people. A lot of people love Anora. I respect Mikey Madison. I think she's phenomenal in that movie. I think it's Sean Baker's weakest film that did not deserve Best Picture.
I thought it was a really enjoyable film that I liked a whole lot, but not a sweeping the Oscars type film. That's kind of how I viewed it. Is like, I watched it and I was like, wow, I enjoyed myself the whole movie. Second act I was laughing. It was silly. It was weird, but at the same time, not quite on that caliber. But I feel like we've been talking about that. It's almost just been where we've been at with movies over the last year. A lot of good, mm-hmm. But not a whole lot of standing out as this is no Oppenheimers this year. Sean,
you guys are burying the lead. Dune Part 2 came out last year. What are you guys talking about? Like, is everyone taking
the brutalist guy? I hate to say
came
it,
out
I'm
last
not
year,
a Dune
guys.
guy.
We had better movies.
The Brutalist was better than Anora. I think Wicked was better than Anora. Okay, I thought Wicked was incredible.
Whoa!
Wicked's an incredible movie.
I respect
it.
That.
Definitely made me feel more than Anora. I thought Anora was good. I was waiting to love it, like the internet seemed to love it, and then I watched it and I was like, this is a good movie, but I'm not like loving it. But yeah, the way the Oscars have treated Dune needs to like be taught in schools. That's how insane it is to me. And the fact that the director of Emilia Perez got nominated over Denis Villeneuve should be a crime, and people should be in jail for it.
That's the Academy. That's what happens. That's what we've come to love about the Academy, is that they never get it right.
I watched 30 minutes of Emilia Perez and turned it off. I never turn off movies ever.
That was 29 minutes too long, Sean. It was too much.
Pretty brutal.
Yeah, tough stuff.
I do agree with like this year. I mean, I've only watched a few movies from this year, to be honest. I mean, it's kind of been it usually is light in the first few months, but I think Companions is my favorite movie I've seen this year, which I think I would have liked even more if the marketing didn't give away too much. I didn't even watch a trailer, and I still felt like I knew too much about the movie, which is kind of just a problem in its own thing. But recently, this will be an Agents of Fandom plug, but I just watched Dope Thief. It's a new series coming to Apple TV Plus on March 7th or March 14th. I just dropped my review for that on Agents of Fandom if you want to check it out. It's the pilot gave it a lot of promise that I don't think the series delivered on, but I still think it's like worth a watch because Brian Tyree Henry and Wagner Moura put on a class act of just a phenomenal acting as being like these kind of lifelong best friends. And the premise is basically they're from Philly. They pose as DEA agents and rip off like small drug dealers to make money. And then Brian Tyree Henry's character's mom, or like surrogate mom, gets into some financial trouble, so they try to up the ante and they raid a house they shouldn't have raided, and then it turns into this big thing that kind of sets the whole series down, the events it does. But I just feel like a lot of the side characters weren't really serviced really well, and I don't know, it just, the pacing feels weird. The finale kind of comes and you're like, oh, all of this happened in 15 minutes when the rest of the series kind of took their time with everything. So Ridley Scott produced it and directed the pilot, and I can't remember the dude's, it's Craig something, it's in my review, but he is mostly known, he created the series, but he's mostly known, he has writing credits on Top Gun Maverick, The Batman, a ton of legit very well done stuff. So that also was a little disappointing to see, oh wow, this guy obviously knows how to write things, and then you see how this series is laid out. And it could be, to TJ's point, where there's so much good TV nowadays that you do need to kind of live at this different standard than maybe when the streaming wars started, I guess. You know, like every Netflix series is, most of them get forgotten about because, for one, it's a binge model. For two, half of them are fine and not good. And you need to be at least good to be memorable. So, I mean, I guess if you want a crime drama thing to watch that. But there's definitely better things to watch, especially on Apple TV Plus, which I think has become probably the best or second best streaming service there is out there. I'm also watching The White Lotus season 3. I'm liking it and not loving it, but I'm also realizing that I binged the other 2 seasons and did not watch them as they were coming out. So I'm trying to keep that in mind. I like the characters. I like the intrigue so far. So I really got to wait and see how things pan out to see where I fully land with it. But I'm liking it. And I hope a certain voice cameo pays off as an actual cameo later on in the series. If you're watching, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Can I say real quickly too? You mentioned Apple TV Plus. I did the embargo's not up quite yet, so I can't really say a whole lot. But I did watch the first 10 minutes of The Studio in my adventure to watch those episodes today. A new show coming out on Apple TV Plus on March 26th. I am really, really vibing with it the first 10 minutes. Even though
In the whole
I have,
series of that.
yeah, of the whole series. I have all of the episodes. I haven't had time to watch them. Unfortunately, the embargo breaks tonight, so I won't say anything more. But based on that, I think Apple TV Plus turning out the good TV shows so far.
Yeah,
It is
I will say
the-
one thing
Mhm.
thing about the studio. I feel like it's the show that the franchise on HBO wanted to be. That's all.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't watch the franchise. I heard mixed reviews. So okay, cool. Sounds good.
It's like
Apple
fun, but
TV
like
Plus
not great.
is
Yeah,
the
I don't know.
worst streaming service in terms of quantity. It is by far the best streaming service in terms of quality. It's kind of how I view it. Like they are still lacking, especially in the movie standpoint of just like, I'm going to
Yeah.
open up an app and see what there is to watch today.
They
if you're
they
an
gave
app,
us Killers of the Flower Moon.
yes,
guys,
that's
come
what I'm
on.
saying.
They
Quality,
gave us one of the best movies of the last 20 years.
quality, not quantity though.
Fair.
Like there are just very few. Like if you're an avid movie watcher, you can go through it in like a week, and then there's not a whole lot left to tag in for. So
No.
number one in terms of quality, but they still need to ramp up that quantity a little bit. One of, if not the top show on Apple TV Plus, it's Severance. And
It is
Ethan,
now.
one thing we talk about anytime it's someone's first time on our Severance pod is I want to know what your Severance journey is.
Sure.
Are you like Sean and was watching this as it came out 3 years ago? Or are you like me who binged it about 2 weeks before season 2 came out?
I gotta be honest, TJ. People that binged it in preparation for season 2, just like I don't respect you. Like you didn't put in the work. You know what I mean? Like Sean and I out here putting in the freaking work for the last 3 years. We had to sit on that cliffhanger for 3 years, and now this is our payoff. I, much like Sean, enjoyed Severance when it came out. I was week to week, and then I waited and waited and waited. I revisited season 1. I did a full revisiting review over my YouTube channel. Movies Are So Back. In preparation for this, I am covering Severance on a weekly basis over there as well. I'm a couple weeks behind. My ring light broke, and I've been really, really busy. So those reviews are coming on the channel. But I have been, like I said, putting in the work, and I'm here for season 2. Hopefully, we don't have to wait 3 years for season 3. But I'm having a really good time with Severance so far. I have really mixed thoughts on this week's episode. So I'm curious to get into it when we do get into it. But Severance, definitely one of the TV shows to watch right now.
Couldn't agree more. Sean, I talked with you at the beginning of season 1, of season 2, now talking at the end toward the end of season 2. What have you thought about season 2 in comparison to season 1 this season as a whole, as a series? What do you think?
I think they've done what most series fail to do in a season 2 and take everything and ramp it up and improve on it. And you guys will see once you get to the finale in a few weeks, but the finale is, and I think I said this before, because I think I saw the finale at that point too. It is one of the best constructed finales I've seen in my life. Like the way it culminates everything in such an insane fashion, so much so that. So Ethan, I'll let this on you. This is how crazy this season was for screeners. They sent the first 6.
Right.
Normally.
That's what I heard. Yeah. And then they're sending them weekly now, right?
Yes. But before that, they said, hey, once you finish them, let us know. We'll send you a link to the last 4. You only have 48 hours to watch them.
Oh, geez.
So it was in a separate screening service. I watched through them once, rewatched the finale, and then that's all I had. So now that they're coming out the week of, I've been revisiting them again. And I know obviously you guys covered episode 7 last week, but after rewatching that again, after knowing what comes after it, it elevated that episode even higher than when I first watched it. Because when I first watched it, I was so overwhelmed with just the insanity that is that episode, that knowing what comes after and then revisiting it, I was like, this episode's even better than I remembered. What? But it's interesting. I've been interestingly awaiting the conversation of this episode in particular, because I think this is a problem with how people watch TV nowadays. When a series drops an episode that is a game changer and that everyone is like, love of doors, the one after is usually just doomed, no matter what.
Mm.
And it's a word that people use far too much, and that word is filler. And if you think this episode is filler, you just weren't paying attention. I'm not trying to be like hyperbolic or anything, but a lot does happen in this episode for the entire series and the world building and the kind of mystery around Lumon that I think is important to know moving forward. And that's like the one thing they're like, man, after last episode, I can't believe they gave us an episode like this. It's shorter. It just follows Cobel. Like, who's this? And it's like, I don't. You got to go into a little more open mind, I think, and really into what is said in this episode, because a lot is said that is very important.
So
that you miss very easily.
A really good analogy that I like to use when I am watching television shows is this kind of Alfred Hitchcock kind of like tea kettle idea, right? Of like, okay, we're boiling. At some point in time, we need to let some steam out or we will boil over. And that is kind of the unfortunate crux of like a television show moving into 7, 8, 9, and 10 episodes is like, do you risk the boil over and hope you get as close to, like filling the pot at the perfect temperature? Or do you ruin the very good thing that you have that could make for a very good, brew or tea or whatever you're making? So this idea of like 7, I think, is more of like a steam off episode than this week's episode, actually, because we're like back in Severance, we're back at Lumon, we're back with Cobel. Like last week's episode was a complete disjointed narrative from that, and I think like getting the cinematographer Jessica Lagagne to do an episode 7 in particular, I think is a very smart play from Ben Stiller to say like, we're going to let a little bit of the steam out and then we're going to bring it back to the perfect boil. And that's how we'll finish the season. I hope, I assume. I haven't seen the screeners, so I don't know where we're headed, but I'm in line with you, Sean. I think like important episode here that I think is not as good as 7, not as good as we have been, but definitely when we get to it's a building block, right? It is definitely a formidable building block. And not to say I called it, but like in episode 2, 3, whenever we do get the moment of Harmony driving away and Mark basically shouting at her like, what is happening? What are we doing? I was like, okay, we're gonna team up at some point. Like she's gonna come back and her and Mark will team up. And this is where we are now, which I think is fascinating. Sorry, TJ, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're all good. You're all good. The one thing I wanted to mention before we go too far past episode 7 is I really do think specifically, I mean, Severance in general, Paradise in general, but specifically Severance episode 7, Paradise episode 7, both of those releasing in the same week. Obviously, we got things like The White Lotus on right now. Andor is coming. The Last of Us is coming. Is there another season of The Bear dropping in 2025? I can't remember. Probably.
I believe, yeah.
Within the Emmy cycle, I don't know. But there's going to be a lot of competition within this year's Emmys. But having said that, I can't help but feel like we're going to be talking about Paradise episode 7 and Severance episode 7 once again come Emmy season. We're going to be having that conversation again. I think because media literacy is dead and people don't understand what words mean, they equate in today's day and age the word filler as I didn't like or I didn't get the story I wanted, and don't equate it for what it actually means at all. And this episode truly was the opposite of a filler episode. It very much advanced the plot. Having said that, like, I mean, I'm pro filler episodes for what it's worth. I want longer seasons. I want more episodes, and I want wacky holiday side plots and side quests and rounded things that last on only along one episode as opposed to only, 8 to 10 episode seasons of television. Get me back to 22, 23. But this wasn't filler, but at the same time, this episode was a disappointment for me. It kind of felt like there was one reveal they really wanted to tell, and so they made a whole episode out of it when it really just had to be a secondary plot in another episode. It felt very jarring to me to switch from the highest like emotional stakes we've felt in a while with episode 7, and just seeing the torture that Gemma's been undergoing. It already was a step away from the crew we all know and love. We didn't get to see much Mark S. We didn't get to see much Helly. We didn't get to see much Irving in what he's out to on the upside. We didn't get to see more about Dylan G's affair with his own wife. And so with that being said, I feel like this could have been another 55 minute episode that also included those characters in some capacity. It just felt like too much of a hard left for me. It felt like the momentum was so hot go after episode 7. And like you said, Ethan, it was a let the steam out episode because of the like escape we took, or not escape, but like the sidestep we took from the main plot. But at the same time, the show's momentum and just like, conversing about it on social media, and like Severance is at its like sky high momentum, and it really just felt this one like took a left turn of, all right, we're going to hang out with a character that you haven't seen in 7 episodes. We're going to spend the entirety of the time with her. We're going to have it be very slow moving, except for 2 scenes that are super intense and exciting. And then it's done. Back for next week. It just felt like it could have been more, and this could have been a story maybe told pieces of throughout the season, and then have the reveal still be in the 8th in the 8th episode like it was, but it didn't need to be its own thing. What did you think, Ethan?
I think from a creation perspective, like I have a lot of respect for Ben Stiller and company to put 2 episodes back to back that are so clearly backstory and narrative driven, allowing us more sympathy for Gemma and Mark, and then more sympathy for Harmony Cobel and her relationship with Lumon. And I think pairing these 2 episodes is really fascinating, because not only did we learn more about Gemma in episode 7 and like that relationship with Mark, which actually was not as emotional impacting for me as I feel like it was for other people, but I viewed that more as like understanding the relationship and the power. I think a power structure has been like a huge overarching theme of this season. The power that Lumon has over people's relationships with their loved ones and with their family. We got that with episode 7. Now we get this with episode 8. And this idea of like, how do you have sympathy for someone so evil like Harmony Cobel, who has really put us in this position and put Mark in this position, really? And the only way to do that is to allow us this 35 minutes, essentially, to learn more about her backstory. Sean, you mentioned we learned more about Lumon and basically how they are not only after natural resources like water, they are after human resources like humans, and basically coming and gutting a town and leaving that town and implementing things like child labor and the absolute destructive properties that Lumon has. Now, with that, I found really fascinating this episode that like we keep harkening back to this theme of Lumon above all, because what's more important than getting to say goodbye to your mom? Respecting Kier and having loyalty for Kier. And that it is very clearly stated, like Cobel even says, like Kier above all. Like they knew this. Sissy says this as well. And so like this idea that Lumon has this never ending like kind of puppet master ability on people's relationships. I like that we learn more about Harmony and like her backstory with her mom, and the reveal to me feels, I guess I'm like just a little bit opposite you, TJ. Like I feel like I was there for the backstory, I wasn't there for the reveal. And so like getting the reveal at the very end felt like it just felt like a little unstructured plot device to be like, okay, and now we're back to Severance for 8, 9, and 10. Like I liked learning about her backstory. I liked learning about the town. I thought that was beneficial. I'm not sure we needed a really big kind of theory-driven reveal at the very end of this. I will just put out there the one big issue that I have with Severance so far this season, and especially after episode 8 as well, there's just too many questions. We're just not getting enough answers yet. And I'm very, very worried moving into the back 3 episodes that like we're just things are loose ends will get away from us. And I find that a little troubling. And I know we got some answers here about Harmony and Severance and the I guess how Lumen and their schools operate, and this idea of like fascist corporate power. But I just get nervous. So I liked the episode. I didn't love the episode.
I guess speaking more to your point, I did enjoy seeing the backstory as well. What I just felt a little bit jarring, and I'm honestly speaking to this more as a fan than a critic when I word it this way, is I kind of felt like I missed my friends and I was really excited to see my friends, and we were going to have this group get together that I was really building up in my head because it was going to be a lot of fun. And then when I get to the group get together, I realized none of my friends could make it except for this other person who I haven't seen in a really long time. They're cool. I'm enjoying hanging out with them. I'm not saying that, this hang with this person's a disappointment. Harmony Cobel, great discussion over a beer we had. But I was excited to see all my other friends too. So it was a bit of a disappointment when I didn't get to. Sean, what did you think of this episode? We get a ton of really important backstory from, and the other point I wanted to make, piggybacking off of Ethan, is so much of, we see within a dictatorship, like as terrifying as it is, we're seeing strands of this happening within the United States right now, and that's the controlling of information. And that's ensuring that, like, hey, this propaganda is going to be the only, like, we need to make sure this is the only information you're seeing. No external perspectives, just what we want you to see with all the Kier stuff. We see how that happens not just in the severed floor, but outside of the severed floor. And it's so interesting to hear these stories from, season 1. Kier Egan and his wife met at this factory. It was so beautiful. They met at work. They fell in love. It's the American dream. And now we actually see the truth of this factory, where they go in, they gentrify a neighborhood, they create a ton of jobs so people has work to do, but they're also using child labor. They're also poisoning the town with whatever is being created in the factory. It's making them all sick.
I believe it's an ether factory is what it is.
Yep.
And so, like, you see all the terrible things they're doing. It's not this sweet story that they're told, which you look at history, history is written by the oppressors.
Yeah, actually, Carlos in the YouTube chat said the reveal doesn't make a lot of sense to him, and I feel the opposite, because we got to remember, Severance is a play on corporate America and how, like, they're trying to control our lives. It's just an over dramatized sci-fi wacky experiment of corporate America. And exactly what you said, like, of course they would take someone who invents this thing that is kind of the linchpin of their new thing and just make them feel like middle management. That's what corporate America does. They take everyone's idea, claim it for themselves because you sign a thing saying anything you create here belongs to us. We see it with comics all the time. Comic creators, people saying, oh, they don't get their love for creating it. It's like, yeah, they signed an agreement saying everything they write, they don't own. That's why creator-owned comics are such a big thing. Like, we see it every day. And that's exactly why this means perfect sense. And if you go back and look at that conversation that Helena and Harmony have in the beginning of season 2, you're like, oh, I get why she's so mad now. And go back to season 1 when she gets fired. Of course she's going to be up, like, insanely hysterically mad, because she's the reason all of this is happening. She created all of it. So of course she's going to be upset, like that. And like having something like that, where it's like, oh yeah, someone who is a manager of a floor is really the one who created all this crazy technology, and then just getting sublimated to just be that middle management for the rest of your life. Like, that is corporate America. That is the quote unquote American dream. That's the false promise of everything. Like, that reveal is the antithesis of the show. 100%. And you again, I don't think this episode is the greatest thing ever, but it does have some very interesting things.
You also can see how perfectly they crafted that middle management position for her too, where it's like, you can see why she was happy in that spot, because that's her baby. She created it, and she's in charge.
Got to oversee it.
That's her thing. Yeah. But if you're not actively making me in charge of the whole company, why would there be anything else I want to do other than work on my baby? So it does add a lot of context to that firing.
This show too is really all about what's underneath the surface, right? Basements. We visit a basement in this episode again, like what is on the floors below, what is happening below us, below the surface. And I think what this episode does in a pretty sly and effective manner is bubble up that tension between Harmony and Helena. And like you said, Sean, go back to that conversation of them in the parking lot. And if you watch like last week on Severance before this episode, it makes a very surefire point to highlight that conversation and their kind of their tension against one another. And so I do think in that fashion, this reveal adds a lot of fuel to that fire of building our not necessarily hatred, but like our detest for Helena as an audience, episode after episode after episode, to say like, oh man, she really is an Egan. Like she really is not here for what we thought she was here for. And even so much as the people inside of Lumon have been affected by this as well. It is not just Mark and Gemma and Devon and the people on the outside, but it is an inside disease as well. So like, I think this episode probably won't get its due in what it does for narratives that happen outside of this space, this 35-minute space. It affects a lot of relationships with what we learn that I think are important. And it does do that in a satisfying manner.
It's so interesting to see how different people interpret media differently, because Carlos is actually saying in YouTube right now, like he's right with you, Sean. That part made complete sense. What he didn't buy was Harmony being technologically adept enough to design chips, but she's also been a victim of child labor, indoctrination. She's been getting high since she was 8 years old, they said, with whatever weird drug that was. But to me, that was the part that I actually found so interesting, because what I'm picturing is I'm realizing that, oh, Miss Huang is the new Harmony Cobel. Yep. This is who they're grooming to do this stuff. And when you have all the resources, all the time to do one specific task, you're able to, you're able to accomplish things when you're, not severed into all these different things, or maybe, you know what I mean? But I tried to make that into a real life scenario and it didn't work. But when you're not getting pulled a bunch of different ways and you have one focused task and all the resources to accomplish, you can do great things. And what I found so interesting about that was we've been all wondering, who the fuck is this child? Why are you here? Why are you a kid? Because of when I was born. It's been like that audience has been asking it. The Sever employees have been asking it. And we hear that she was the first winner or like leader of the Wintertide internship, the exact same thing, fellowship, the exact same thing that Miss Huang's doing right now. And so that kind of spoke to me. And it's especially when, speaking of corporate America just being stupid, I remember working at a restaurant as I'm making my way through university. And I just remember us having all of these incredible servers at this restaurant, servers and bartenders who had been there for years and years, while they're either, some are getting their degrees in something, some have another job, some have are just doing this. But a lot of really, really talented people, but the people who would get the quote unquote promotions were the ones that they felt like they could groom and stay there for a really long time. And it didn't actually matter how good they were at their job or how good they were at leading other people. It was people they could keep in that spot. They thought they'd be able to keep in that spot for a long time. And so you really see, like, it's cool to hear that Harmony underwent that same story that I feel like Miss Huang is currently going through.
I think in relation to that, like you mentioned, I know earlier I talked about this entire show having like a thematic overreach of or like an overarching idea of relationships, but like you mentioned Dylan G's relationship with his wife, like this show is also about isolation, right? And this is not new. This is a season 1 idea as well. And I think this episode, the more that I talk about it, the more that I think about it, is just like deepening that well of isolation. Like Harmony is so isolated. She is even isolated in her own home, her own childhood home, where she cannot access the room of her mother. Like she has to search for the key, right? And like this idea of what this key represents within her heart, her mind, and these things, that she literally has to unlock the door and go against her family's wishes. And I think in relationship to what you said about Miss Wong, like, and her kind of replacing, like, Lumon is just isolating these people. This is their job. They're trying to isolate people. For what end purpose, we don't quite know yet, unless we do by the end of season 2. I'm not sure. Big question mark. We'll see, I guess. But I think that this is a really good episode in displaying how painful that isolation can be, and relating it, TJ, you said, to like a real life thing. This idea of theology and religion and structure is so drawing for some people, so fascinating, because as a child, if you do find yourself in situations in which you're not treated fairly, or with isolation like Harmony was, child labor, or things like that, you tend to grip onto these communities that give you a sense of placement. And so it is really hard to get out of those things. And they have everlasting retributions for what the impacts they have.
Sean, I mean, obviously, if this is something that is specifically talked about more in the later episodes, never mind, and I'll throw it to Ethan. But
Okay.
An interesting thought I had when I was watching it, and we're talking in chat right now about how it's kind of, maybe intentionally vague about where Severance is set, about when Severance is set. As Ava brings up in chat, they have touchscreen phones, but they have old cars, old computers, oil lamps. Like, it's very out of time, vague about it all. Another thing that I found that they were a little vague with was who the hell Sissy Cobel actually is. Like, what's her relation to all of it? Is this Harmony's older sister? Is this her aunt? At first, I thought it was her mom until I realized, no, her mom had died, and that's what all of this is about. Like, what do you think her connection to all of this is? Is she just like Harmony's aunt who's obsessed with Lumon, and that's the end of it? Or is she a potential bigger player?
That's an interesting question. Also, I did want to clarify, Miss Wong is not, what she's doing now at Lumon isn't the Wintertide Fellowship. She is working there to earn the chance to go on the Wintertide Fellowship.
Got it.
Keep that in mind. What the Wintertide Fellowship is, we still have no idea, which is a whole thing in and of itself.
While we're on random points, just before I forget to bring it up, another weird thing about all of this that I saw on Twitter, this is completely unrelated, but I forgot to add in the rundown, and I don't want to forget. Ellie R's employee ID is also listed on the Cold Harbor file Mark is working on. Just throwing that out there. Just throwing that in. Continue.
All I'm going to say is think about episode 7, and you'll see in a few weeks. That's all I'm going to say. Even that is vague, but the show, I think Ethan makes a good point with, they do answer a lot of questions in the finale for sure, but they also leave a lot of stuff open-ended. Like me kind of revisiting, going back, I'm like, oh yeah, they didn't really touch on that more. But again, this is an ongoing series. They can't close everything up.
Yeah.
But I think they do answer a lot of the pressing questions that like kind of need to be answered. They've already kind of started. People kind of have an idea of what Cold Harbor is now after episode 7 and like what they're actually doing. I will say it gets a lot more clarified for sure coming up. I don't know if that's too spoilery, so I'm sorry if that's too much, but they give answers, but they ask more questions for sure. The Sissy Cobel, that's a really good question. It's so weird because we don't know, like, I think they were just a victim of like a lot of what happens to a lot of small towns. Like a business comes in, they add something that adds more jobs, they value it, but with the whole Egan cult like stuff that comes with it, I think it just plagued the town and completely ruined it. Even so much so it's like crazy when Harmony proves that she is like the inventor of the Severance ship, she tries to burn it. Like, what? You're like, they're so brainwashed that she's trying to cover up for them, that so there's no proof that she can prove that. Like, that's insane. That's like the level of cultism that's involved with Lumon and everything. And even what they did in episode 7, you see that like every product
reflective of real life, like painfully so.
Yeah, dude, 100%. And
Of,
as
look
we've
at this
seen, like,
terrible thing this person did. Oh no, that wasn't them. It's fake. It's even if they did that, there was a good reason, like.
yeah. And as we've seen, like Lumen, you see all the Lumen products in the outside world because the show does a really good job of kind of secluding the outside world from us, like the audience, to keep it like this weird, vague thing. But as we saw more of it, because most of it kind of episode 7 does take place in the outside world, you see Sunshine because it's in the past, it's in the before times. And you see Lumen is like the manufacturer of all of this stuff. And you're like, man, this, and in the episode before that, when you learn about how Bert got brought into Lumen, they're in the infrastructure of religion to promise people, like you'll get salvation if you get severed. Like they're in so many things. It's like absolutely insane. And that's what I love that this show does, is they do these things and they're not beating you over the head with it. They're doing it in these very subtle, just dialogue ways. And the more you think about it, the more you're like, this is the most evil corporation ever made. They have their claws into everything. And that is kind of reminiscent of a lot of things that does happen, but like the way the show handles it is so creative and smart. And this is kind of circling back to what TJ, I think, said earlier. I do wonder if this episode would have been a lot more, I guess, digestible is a word, or more enjoyable if it was kind of laced in with other things going on, instead of just being this singular. Because even last week's, you still got stuff kind of sprinkled in of what's happening now, mostly with Mark and what's going on with his sister finding him and the reintegration and everything like that. There was still that through line to like what's happening with everyone else, at least Mark. So maybe it could have benefited from that, because the big difference from season 1 to season 2 is season 1 was 9 episodes. This season is 10 eepisodes. Maybe they could have done another 9-episode season and edited it differently, so it kind of was integrated with it. But like there's a weird part of me that liked that we're stuck in this cold, like desolate, defeated town. There's a part of me that like, I think that's what made part of it effective. I don't know.
I wonder from my perspective. So episode 2 did something similar where we kind of got displaced from like our main timeline, if you want to say. Like we took an episode to go back, right, to learn some more things and to take a little bit of some space. Episode 7 also does the same thing. This idea of how relationships form and basically determine what is the future. I wonder if we, just from like a creative perspective, this idea that this episode is filler or unsuccessful or out of place or whatever the case may be, I wonder if it works better as an episode 5, because we are 2 episodes removed from Harmony Cobel and her. I feel like at this point in time, episode 8, we have been removed from her storyline for a little bit too long to kind of go back and to really feel that connection with her, especially with this idea of desolation. I know after Woe's Hollow episode 4, we're kind of at a peak with like what is happening to MDR after Irving kind of does what he does at the retreat. So I wonder if then again, like we take a bonus episode and like stick this in as episode 6, like, and go back to isolation, go back to cold cinematography, go back to this idea of an ancillary character a little bit. So I wonder if it's a little bit out of place being in episode 8, and that could be kind of part of this pushback. At least that's how I feel.
I was thinking about that as well, and I think from like stylistically, it would have fit perfect closer to the middle of the season, right around episode 5. But at the same time, the reveal wouldn't have fit at that time. You needed the reveal to happen as Mark was in this
stage
what I'm saying. Of his severance.
That's why this reveal feels a little bit forced. It feels a little bit like they turned their hand to having to move the show forward.
We could have had the big backstory episode as part of episode 5 and still do the reveal in episode 8 as Devon is calling her, and like finally gets through, and that's when this reveal happens before that. But like it kind of felt to me as the vibe fit earlier in the season, but the reveal fit the end of the season. And that's why I kind of felt like maybe this would have been best if we didn't just disappear from Harmony for 6 episodes and we were getting little pieces of her throughout the time, kind of leading up to this. Or, you know, just have this one be a hour-long episode like the rest of them and include some more throughout it. Include, like, if you're giving us backstory to this little town, give the bartender man a name, who she used to work with.
I was deeply uninterested in that character. I thought he was like just significantly should not have been there. To be honest with you,
it felt like there was too much time spent with him to learn that little about him.
That's fair, for sure.
Yeah, totally fair. Like, I agree with you guys. I think if we're gonna go this route and like learn about this town, give us 10 more minutes. Like, let us live in it. Like, you've got Jessica Lagonre like making a beautiful scene out of Newfoundland here, and like they went there, they shot this, they used their increased budget to make this show look better and on location. Like, that's Severance knows it's a very good prestige television show, and it knows what it is, and I think that it should keep doing that. And like, yeah, just give us a little bit more. But yeah, I don't know. I'm interested. Sweet Vitriol also, like, as a title for this is fitting, but also like the description, discoveries are made. I just think they like jumped the shark a tad on this one.
I was waiting for a lot different discoveries. I wanted more discoveries, not just this one discovery that I wasn't thinking about at any point during the season.
But she found the key. That was another discovery. She found where the key was.
There you go. That's another discovery.
TJ, what did you text me last night? It was the funniest thing ever.
Oh, yeah. I was like live texting Sean my reaction, and I was like, what the hell is Harmony doing? Is she just like trying to breathe her mom's final breaths, like from these tubes from the
This is my favorite thing you texted me.
And then
quote, I need a minute. I need to think. I need to find it. Bitch, you've been asleep for hours.
She wakes up when her friend busts into the room, and he's like, we gotta go. I got things to do. I drove you to this house and you're just having a nap. And she's like, oh, yeah. I need a minute to think. I gotta find what I was looking for. You were just having a nap, and it went from light out to dark out. This was clearly an extended period of time.
I will play the devil's advocate here that thematically and narratively it is tied to Mark and last episode. Where did you go? Like, this idea that when you are in a safe space and you are venturing and coming to grips and realities and terms with your history and your past and past relationships and traumas and pains, you go somewhere and time doesn't exist where you are. So this idea that when Cobel does wake up and she goes, I need a minute, I need to find it. Totally hear what you're saying. Totally agree. I thought kind of one of the weakest written episodes this season. It is so plainly pulled. There is strong stuff here with Sissy and Cobel having a back and forth, but like those moments feel a little bit underwritten. But it's also the same way that Mark reacts, where it's like he's been gone. He's been displaced. So he needs to come back to where he was. And like, at the end of the day, Harmony is like a deeply traumatized person. She chose Lumon over her mother. Like that, and we can only assume, and again, like this goes back to the point of give us a little bit more time. We can only assume she had a great relationship with her mother and a very attached relationship with her mother. We don't know that. We can infer, but like if you're laying on her deathbed, breathing her tubes, like I can only assume you wanted to say goodbye in some form or fashion and you didn't. So, yeah, it is impressive what the show is doing thematically and stylistically to like tie all of these things together. I really appreciate that about this show.
That's a really good point. And I mean, hey, I've disassociated for an hour or two before as well. So I guess I can't really judge. I think it's important to note that I don't think this was by any means a bad episode of television.
No.
I think this was a bad episode of Severance. I think the bar is so high because, like, genuinely, most of these episodes for me have been at worst a 9 out of 10, a 4.5 out of 5. This to me felt like a 3 out of 5, a 6 out of 10. You know, a classic good episode of TV, but the momentum just kind of came to a crashing halt for me because of how good all of the previous episodes leading up to it have been. Ethan, I'll throw it back to you since you brought up this was your theory from the beginning of the season. we conclude with Cobel off to team up with Mark and Devon.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Petey's friend, I always forget her name, Dr. Rugbaji, is that what it was? Ragabi, thank you. Mixed up my syllables. Do you think she's going to come back into the fold? Obviously, I can't ask Sean for theories because he's seen it. I feel like at the very least, my favorite trope in all of TV and film is getting the squad together. And that seems like what we're getting a little bit here at the end.
Yeah. I'm really torn on this because like Severance is not like a team up show. Like I know we have MDR and like I know we have our squad, but it's like it's not a team up show, guys. It's a show about one-on-one relationships. Like Mark with Helly, Mark with Gemma, Cobel with Lumon. Like it is all about these one-on-ones. At the risk of sounding dumb like an idiot in front of Sean, I guess I will put forth my ideas of what might happen in the future episodes. I do think we're going to get like a big team up here. This is what I kind of predicted after episode 2 or 3, that we will get Miss Cobel, we'll get Mark, Devon. I can only hope that Ragabi, like, in my opinion, a supremely underwritten character for how incremental she is to what she is doing with Mark and the reintegration. I hope that she can see the benefits of being part of this group. That would mean that we do have kind of our outside 4, which would then, in theory, narratively tie to our inside 4, our inside MDR, right? So this idea of a flipped coin, which I think is really interesting, considering Mickey 17 is out this weekend as well, and this idea of a dichotomy in your own identity. So I think they will team up. What are they going to do? Like, I think that when we get to episode 10, the idea that we have always been working towards for a season ending is, and we know Severance is very good at ending seasons on very large cliffhangers. I think the idea that they're moving forward is like, let's take Lumon down, right? Like that's where we're headed with Miss Cobel, seems to me. And
let's take Lumon down and let's reunite Mark with Gemma.
I'm less interested in reuniting Mark with Gemma. I'm more interested in the corporate espionage side of things here. And I think that puts me on the outs in terms of like what narratives I'm most personally associated with, because people are all like, free Gemma. I don't know. Sounds, yeah, sure, let's do it. But I'm more interested in what Miss Cobel is doing with Lumon and the broad scope of things. So we'll see what the team does.
I am with you 100% of the dichotomy of 4 squad on the outside, squad of 4 on the inside. I just think that's what they're building to. It reminds me of like a much more serious and intense version of like a sitcom where 2 characters got to get married and, oh my gosh, we're going to do this right now. And everybody's trying to whip things together really quick. And you got one side over here doing the outside stuff, one side over here doing the inside stuff. And eventually you get your 2 couples together, Mark and Gemma, and we're going to reunite them. That's where I feel like season 2 is going to. And I think season 3 will be the destruction of Lumon. That's kind of how I think it's going to be, is season 2 about reuniting Mark and Gemma. Bang, cliffhanger, they're together. We don't know what happens. Wait for season 3 about taking down Lumon. That's how I think it's going to go.
I think putting Mark and Gemma together by the end of the season is too much resolution for this season, to be frank. Like I think this is a season built on non-resolution. It is a season built on questions. It is a season built on asking, where are we going? Carlos mentions in the chat, like, discoveries will be made. Like, it's so vague. If you put them together by the end of the season, a lot of people will be satisfied. I don't think, from my perspective, that's not the end goal of the season. The end goal is to have less resolution and more questions, and season 3 will be a question answering. Sean's smiling a lot, and I want to stop talking because I don't want anything spoiled for me. I'm really enjoying week to week.
What if they get Gemma out, but it's not Gemma?
I will not
what if it's
say
not
anything,
Gemma?
But the way Twitter is going to react at the final scene of the season.
Is it going to be like, are we bad or good? Like, are people going to be good? Are people going to be happy?
Oh, no.
No, don't answer that question.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it.
I don't want to.
I will. The only thing I've been saying is that
it's going to end with Mark and Gemma reuniting, but it's going to be Miss Casey, and they're going to realize that the only space Gemma exists is the bottom 3rd floor of Lumon right now.
Don't say anything, Sean. Yeah, we got to move on. Yeah.
Sean,
thing I've been
final
saying
thoughts
about
on Severance season 2, episode 8.
yeah, the only thing I've been saying about the ending is that it's similar into season 1, where you're like, I need to know what happens now, and that's all I will say, because it's very vague. Like I said, it's not my favorite episode of the series by any means. I just think it's very interesting what the show continues to do in expanding its lore and building out the world, because I think that's one of the most interesting parts of this show, is that the world building, quote unquote, is done in such a like small and like weird way that I don't know. I don't really know any other shows that do that. Like, everyone kind of lays everything on the table, but like, as I've said, like, the outside world outside the severed floor is very underdeveloped, but it's done very purposely. And I love anytime we get these like little glimpses of what that is. So yeah, I don't know. I'm very weirdly, I don't remember what happens in episode 9, and I don't know it's just I'm melding what happens in episode 9 and episode 10 at once. So I'm very excited to rewatch it next Monday when I get it, so I can remember like what happens where. But I think the conversation is definitely going to change once these 2 episodes come out about if people are negative about this episode or what. Like, some of the criticisms are very valid. Like I said in the beginning, I just don't like the word filler, especially when something is not filler. That's the thing I hate. You can not like this episode. It's super fucking weird. It's like, for a show that is insanely weird. Yeah. This episode is weird. So I get it. I just like, I like the conversations we had around it, dissecting like what the show, this episode in particular, actually had to offer for the series at large. Maybe they could have done it differently, like we've said before, or kind of laced it into other stuff or whatever. Like, we'll never know if that was the case or whatever. But yeah, like, I don't know. I just think this series is like in a league of its own right now. I just, obviously Paradise was very good. Like, Invincible is very good right now. And we got a lot of really good other TV series coming out this year. I just don't see anything reaching the level of what this show is accomplishing. So, yeah. Yay, Severance. In Lumon. Oh, also, a lot of people aren't aware of this thing that happens, but there's a lot of, I'll call them bootleg websites, but they're companies that make like pop culture inspired merch, but they print it on like really nice material, and the designs are always super cool. But there's this place called Studio House Designs, and they're dropping something at 6 p.m. Eastern, and they're doing a whole Severance drop with like hoodies, t-shirts, a bunch of stuff, and they're doing like keyboard mouse pad mats that are like macro data refinement mats that I'm definitely going to buy today. So if you're into that kind of stuff, check out Studio House Designs. I just like their stuff. So
they have video drone stuff up on there right now. That's sick.
They do a ton of super sick stuff, and there's a ton of companies like them. But I saw their Severance tees yesterday, and I was like, I need to mention it on the show. So if people want to buy it, go buy it. I'm definitely buying a mouse pad and a hoodie probably. So
what's it called?
There's that.
What's it called?
StudioHouseDesigns.com.
All right, Studio House Designs. Your first ad was free. Reach out to us and sponsor the show, and we can keep it going forward. Carlos says his theory is that season 2 ends with a resevered Mark waking up on the office table with a voice asking, "Who are you?" And then it ends. This isn't a logic-based theory. This is a theory from my heart, and not even a theory as much as a hope. My hope and dream for not just the series, but for my girl Helly specifically, is that it somehow ends, not even necessarily this season, but the series ends with Helena Egan just kind of no longer existing, and Helly is on the outside, and Helly R just gets to live her life on the outside of the office as the soul and primary vessel of that body. I think would be best case scenario. Ethan, final thoughts on the episode? Anything else you want to get out before about the last 2? And where can people find you on socials? Where can they find your podcast, your YouTube channels, etc.?
Yeah, I will just say my final point. I think Severance is very good at understanding that it's a television show, and I respect that. I love that. And I think in a culture in which many television shows try not to be TV shows, try to continually move faster forward and are adverse to taking their time, I respect Ben Stiller as a creator. I think he has directed some incredible films. If you haven't watched them, go seek them out. And I think that he is a very smart guy when it comes to this stuff. So I love that Severance is doing that. I think this episode is perfect proof that it is doing that. Even though people might believe it to be filler, like we mentioned here for an hour, it has a lot on the table. It lays a lot out and it tells us a lot, even though it does so a little bit differently. I'm really enjoying Severance so far this season. You can find my weekly reviews of Severance over on my YouTube channel. Movies Are So Back. Go subscribe to that. And I'll be doing reviews of new movies and things as well. I do plan to review the new Apple TV Plus show, The Studio, over there as well on a weekly basis. So check that out. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, at Ethan Simi. It's the best place to find me tweeting about how much I love Babylon and Maestro and Oppenheimer on a pretty consistent basis. And find my podcast, the Movie Draft Podcast, wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it may be. New episodes every Tuesday. We do movie drafts, which is really exciting. This coming Tuesday, we've got a Harrison Ford collaborative draft. Me and 3 other people try to collaboratively rank the 13 best, most important, coolest Harrison Ford movies. Not sure. It's a good time though. It's really fun. So if you're interested in movies, go seek those things out.
And if you become good enough friends with Ethan, he will not only invite you to be on the movie draft, but he will forget that he invited you and never get back to you to come back on the show.
You're in prestigious company, TJ, because there are many people that have happened to. So you should enjoy it while it lasts.
Only the best. Only the best. And closest of friends get... sorry, my Captain America shield is trying to drop underneath me here. But make sure you check out Ethan's stuff. Do the same for the Agents of Fandom. Follow us on socials at Agents Fandom on TikTok and Twitter, Agents of Fandom everywhere else. Subscribe to us wherever you get your pods and on YouTube as well. We got lots of fun stuff coming up. Tomorrow, the Comic Corner will drop with AF, Fat Thor, and Damon. Next week, we'll have mine and Sean's interview with the Newton brothers. On Tuesday, we'll have our live after show for Daredevil. On Thursday, we'll have our live show for Invincible. Friday for Severance, and then back Saturday with the Comic Corner. We got some fun interviews coming up for Andor and other exciting projects, as well as some ones already up on the channel. You can find my interview with Invincible creator Robert Kirkman and showrunner Simon Rasiopa, director of Captain America Brave New World Julius Ona, plus lots more on the channel as well. So make sure you check that out. Sean, where can the people find you on socials? And do you have any exciting articles coming up?
Yeah, you can find me on socials at MetalCore Nerds. This is where the pop culture stuff lives. I do have some personal accounts at Sean Xmon if you want to follow that stuff. It's mostly just me collaborating with random things and band stuff. But if you like that, I guess you can follow me there too. Yeah, I have I just finished up an article for Invincible talking about how they delivered a better Kang Dynasty arc than Marvel did. But I go deep into the Marvel lore of that the storytelling wasn't the only aspect that ruined that. So that'll be up soon. I also have an article up about Vanessa and Wilson Fisk, about their turmoiled relationship, as we've seen in Daredevil Born Again, and some of the reasons why it is like that. I also, speaking of Paradise, just dropped an article about what season 2 can entail, as far as what it can bring new to the series and what the show creator has said about each season of the series and how he's planned out that to be. Of course, I mentioned before, my Dope Thief review is out right now on Agents of Fandom, and I have another review coming in a few weeks too. Also very stoked to interview the Newton brothers again. Talked to them last year on my own channel, so stoked to team up with TJ and talk to them for a long time, because those dudes rule.
They really do. We got a nice 45 minutes with them. We're going to have a good time, so make sure you stay tuned for that one. I want to give one extra shout out before we get out of here, and make sure you guys follow Agents of Fandom, specifically on Instagram, because starting out over there, we have one of our newest agents, Alex Tran, who's been doing a really, really awesome job so far, and he's going to be expanding into other things as well. But he's bringing a level of expertise to that side of our social media game that we haven't had before. So make sure you check that out. He's an awesome artist, been doing some cool graphic design things up there. So check out the Instagram, Agents of Fandom. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, whether you're live or after the fact. Smash that like button. On behalf of myself, Ethan, and Sean, we will see you next time. Thanks so much, everyone. Peace.